Welcome to the module on adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is one of many leadership theories that people utilize to understand how to lead. In this module, you will learn what adaptive leadership is and be introduced to some strategies that make exercising adaptive leadership possible. Adaptive leadership was first developed by Ronald Heifetz and expanded upon in collaboration with Marty Linsky. They both serve as faculty in the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. They developed this theory in large part drawing from their experiences and research. As with other leadership theories, leadership is contextualized. People bring their own background to every situation. In developing their theory, the authors drew many of their inferences from the worlds of music, psychiatry, media, politics, and business. Heifetz and Linsky believe that leadership opportunities present themselves every day, and seizing the opportunity and exercising leadership can be risky. Ultimately, leadership is worth the risk because the goals of leadership extend beyond the material gain or personal achievement. Leadership provides meaning and creates purpose for people, organizations, and communities. Leadership is tough work. Exercising leadership requires challenging what people hold dear, their habits, loyalties, behaviors, and ways of thinking. Oftentimes, practicing leadership receives pushback from the people involved in the organization or system. The first part of adaptive leadership is recognizing when a challenge is adaptive and something is technical. The second part of the presentation will examine why leadership is dangerous and what those dangers are. The third part will examine strategies to reduce the risks of leadership. The final part examines how to manage personal vulnerabilities and sustain self and spirit. The central concept of adaptive leadership is that there are two kinds of challenges: adaptive and technical. Failure to correctly identify a challenge is the single most common source of leadership failure. Technical challenges are problems for which people have the necessary know-how and procedures to solve the problem. These problems can be solved with systems and answers that already exist. Technical problems are not simple, though. An example of a technical problem is a heart surgery. Few people in the world think of heart surgery as routine or simple. However, when a doctor is performing heart surgery, they have been able to identify the problem and they are able to fix it. Adaptive problems are much more complex. They cannot be solved by an authority alone. Adaptive challenges require experiments, new discoveries, and adjustments from a variety of stakeholders. An example of an adaptive problem is after heart surgery. Does the patient change their lifestyle to prevent future surgeries? Maybe they have been a smoker or an unhealthy eater their entire life. Maybe they need to begin to exercise more. Changing their habits and behaviors and helping develop a much healthier life requires the work of both the individual and their friends and family. The doctor cannot address the adaptive challenges in the patient's life. That work must be done by the person or people with the problem. People practicing adaptive leadership often experience resistance. Adaptive leadership requires people to change. Change is not something people enjoy because it requires experiencing loss, uncertainty, and sometimes disloyalty to people or cultures. Adaptive change is asking someone to redefine an aspect of their identity. There are four primary risks of adaptive leadership: marginalization, diversion, attack, and seduction. Marginalization can take many forms, sometimes direct and sometimes indirect. Marginalization often occurs because people embody an issue, particularly when you have authority. Diversion is another risk of leadership. This occurs when people try to make you lose focus on the adaptive challenge. This can be done by broadening your agenda so you become distracted, or overwhelming your focus with a variety of unrelated problems. The third risk of leadership is attack. In utilizing attack, people will try to neutralize your message by turning the subject of the conversation from the adaptive challenge to your character or style. Occasionally, attack can take the form of physical attack, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr., for example. But more often, the attack will be people portraying you in a negative light. The final risk of leadership is seduction. Seduction works to lose your sense of purpose. One of the most common forms of seduction is the desire for approval by your own faction or supporters. All four phases of danger serve the purpose of reducing the disturbance you may be creating among people by addressing the adaptive challenge. They work to maintain the familiar and restore order. Being aware of the forms of oppression will be critical in maintaining your purpose and accomplishing your goal of change. The next section will reveal ways to respond to attack and give you the skills to advance your adaptive change. One of the most important and popular concepts from adaptive leadership is to get on the balcony. Broadly, this is defined as the ability to get perspective in the midst of the action, removing yourself from the moment or dance floor and going to the balcony to see what's really going on. The balcony allows people to get perspective and to stand back to see the whole picture in an organization or community. Practicing adaptive leadership requires getting to the balcony, making an observation, and returning to the dance floor to make an intervention. The bullets on the slide indicate 4 strategies to do this. We have already discussed distinguishing the technical from the adaptive, but this is the most important piece of adaptive leadership and is worth revisiting. Often groups prefer technical interpretations because they allow for simple solutions. Distinguishing technical from adaptive is an important piece of getting on the balcony to recognize the true nature of the challenges before you. The second strategy is to find out where people are at. It is important to reach a true understanding of the varying perspectives among various factions and learn from them. If you understand where people are at, you can more effectively identify a starting point to begin adaptive change. If you do not, they are more likely to suffer from one of the faces of danger. The third strategy is to listen to the song beneath the words. Hearing stories is not the same as taking what they say literally. People naturally and unconsciously defend their perspectives. You have to get below the surface value and listen to the song they are singing. This strategy allows you to see the challenges and people's responses for what they are and not what they say. The final strategy to get on the balcony is to read the authority figure for clues. When you seek to create a significant change, focus on authority figures. Their behavior and words provide a critical sign about the impact of your actions. Authority figures will reflect the size and nature of the disturbance you are creating. The strategy of getting on the balcony is a part of the improvisational art of leadership. You have to move back and forth from the dance floor to the balcony, making adjustments each time. Another key piece of adaptive leadership is the ability to orchestrate the conflict. Adaptive leadership is asking people to change their behaviors and ideas. The ability to control how people experience that disturbance is critical in successfully making the change. Orchestrating the conflict requires harnessing the energy you have created and controlling it. One of the more famous ideas around adaptive leadership is to create a holding environment. A holding environment is a space formed by a network of relationships within which people can tackle tough, sometimes divisive questions without flying apart. It can look and feel different depending on the situation. The purpose of a holding environment is to keep stress at a productive level. Part of orchestrating the conflict is controlling the temperature. The tension produced through working towards change needs to be managed. You have to raise the heat high enough that people pay attention, but you have to lower the temperature when it gets too hot and becomes counterproductive. Additionally, in orchestrating the conflict, you need to develop your capacity for taking heat. You can't expect people to withstand a higher level of heat than you can. In order to raise the temperature, you should draw attention to tough questions, give people more responsibility than they are comfortable with, bring conflict to the surface, and protect oddballs and outsiders. In order to lower the temperature, you should address technical aspects of the problem, establish structure for problem solving by breaking the problem into parts, temporarily reclaim some responsibility for tough issues, and slow down the process of challenging norms and expectations. Leadership creates emotional and conceptual stress. In order to lead people through challenges, you must pace the speed they undergo change. If you try to enact too much change, you risk revolt or experiencing one of the faces of danger. Pacing the work can be complicated. It requires giving people only as much information as they can handle. This can lead to withholding information for a period of time. In pacing, you are calculating risks and deciding when they are worthwhile and when they are not. Finally, in orchestrating the conflict, you must show people the future. You have to find ways to remind the people of the orienting values or purpose, the positive vision of this change. As you create the change, you can avoid becoming a lightning rod by showing people the future. You must remind people of the values they are fighting for by showing them what the future could look like. Oftentimes, this requires answering the why questions that can increase people's willingness to endure hardships that come with the journey to a better place. These 4 strategies in orchestrating the conflict will allow you to control it, not become it. In many opportunities for leadership, the clearest way for a leader to be brought down is by themselves. People often self-destruct. Here are central concepts to consider in an attempt to avoid bringing about your own self-inflicted demise. It is important to pay attention to yourselves while you are working to create adaptive change. The first concept to consider is to manage your hungers. Everyone has hungers, it's natural. These are expressions of human need. Sometimes those hungers can be disruptive towards a person's ability to act wisely and purposefully. Every person has a need for power and control. This hunger is human. Everyone wants to have some measure of control over their lives. Containing conflicts and exercising control may create conditions for progress, but exercising control is not progress itself. One example is controlling the temperature. Just because you can control the temperature of a conflict does not mean you are resolving the conflict. It just means the conflict has the ability to be solved at the present time. Another example of a hunger is affirmation and importance. When exercising leadership, some people will oppose you and some will affirm you. Oftentimes, affirmation feels good. It can lead you to want to receive more affirmation and be viewed as more important. But if you give in to the hunger, you can become a heroic lone warrior who saves the day, which hurts your ability to make the work be done by the people who have the problem, a central tenet of adaptive leadership. The second concept is to anchor yourself. Oftentimes people experience their reality through the lens of their position and not their character. It is important to distinguish your role in an organization or community from yourself. But this is a trap. When you put yourself into a leadership role, people will be reacting to the role you have taken. Oftentimes people's responses can feel very personal. It is important to understand that they are reacting to your role and not to you. This is important in both praise and criticism. Getting to the balcony will help you distinguish role from self. Roles end. If you are caught up in your role, you will come to believe that your role and yourself are identical. What happens when your role ends? It is also important to keep confidants and don't confuse them with allies. Confidants have no conflicting loyalties. Your allies are key in accomplishing your task, but they should not serve as anchors. Look outside the boundaries of your organization or community for your confidants. Confidants provide you with a place to say everything that is in your heart and on your mind without prejudice. Additionally, confidants will tell you what you do and do not want to hear as you go through the process of adaptive leadership. These are key strategies that will help you avoid the most common enemy in leadership, yourself. Make sure you consider them early and often when attempting to exercise leadership. This presentation has been an introduction to adaptive leadership. It has identified and discussed key concepts and strategies for understanding and practicing this leadership theory, but it is not comprehensive. In order to learn more about adaptive leadership, see Leadership Without Easy Answers by Ronald Heifetz and Leadership on the Line by Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky. Thank you, and remember, leadership is tough work, but ultimately worth the risk.